They didn't move like any zombies I've ever seen.
Resident Evil Retrospective.
There have been many diaries of zombie lore. Mikami modeled his Biohazard after George Romero's Dead series beginning in 1968. Romero was admittedly influenced by Richard Matheson's novel I Am Legend in 1958, and Matheson sought inspiration from much earlier publications by Edgar Allan Poe and Mary Shelley. Resident Evil has separated itself from these masterworks by focusing heavily on the cause of the epidemic, as a mixture of both scientific curiosity and man's lust for power. It was one of the few properties to actually name the catalyst of its undead apocalypse.
The stars are finished. Someone is a traitor. Umbrella set us up.
The Resident Evil lore has received contributions from numerous sources. The 2004 GameCube remake practically erased the narrative of the first game, adding new events and characters. Author Stephanie Donnell Perry penned 7 novels for the series, 2 of them having no affiliation with any specific game. Anderson's movies have simultaneously taken popular characters on missions their creators never intended, but also introduced new ideas that have been assimilated into the story. The following timeline has been assembled from the encyclopedia of letters, reports, emails, faxes, and memos that have been carelessly abandoned by the innocent and guilty employees of Umbrella. The conspiracy has taken nearly half a century to get to this point. You could say it started in 1962, when billionaire Oswell E. Spencer commissioned a New York architect named George Trevor to design an elaborate mansion. But it really began 4 years later. Spencer, along with scientists Dr. James Marcus and Sir Edward Ashford, discovered an unknown virus in Africa on December 4, 1966. The mystifying organism exhibited the ability to dramatically modify the cells of its host, and the 3 entrepreneurs imagined it could be upgraded to a genetic performance enhancement. They named the phenomenon progenitor, which means ancestor, originator, or founder. Eager to begin tests on unwilling subjects, Spencer invited George Trevor and his family to stay in the mansion the architect designed, now nearing completion at a site deep in the Arklay Mountains. Trevor's wife Jessica and daughter Lisa arrived before him and vanished. George was initially told they left due to a family emergency, and later that they died from an unexpected infection. Fearing for his own life, Trevor planned an escape from the nightmare he helped realize, and his puzzling handiwork stood in his way. Alone and emaciated, Trevor collapsed in front of an open grave with a tombstone bearing his name. He is believed to have died, or decomposed, into something much worse than a simple corpse. When George Trevor was lost in his own maze, his wife and daughter were imprisoned deep within the complex. They were administered 2 variants of the progenitor virus. Jessica was able to withstand its effects and was subsequently disposed of, but Lisa began to show signs of mutation. In a matter of days, these cellular changes took their toll on the girl's brain. Astonished by her resistance to the unethical testing, Spencer kept Lisa under high-security surveillance. With much research to be done, Spencer saw the need to get organized. If incorporated, he could bring on a staff to conduct his experiments, and have a legitimate front to hide their proposed development of bioorganic weapons. Oswell, James, and Edward officially established Umbrella Chemical Inc., and opened its first facility at Spencer's mansion. Close to the mansion, a management training facility was created, and Spencer appointed Marcus to run it. Unfortunately, this newly formed partnership didn't last long, as Edward was quickly infected with progenitor. The virus killed him, and his son Alexander became the new master of the Ashford family. Facing the end of his family's line, Alexander Ashford sought to guarantee his lineage by whatever means necessary. He drew the blueprints for another research facility in the freezing waste of the Antarctic and began unorthodox fertility treatments. The site took 2 years to build. When it was finished, Alexander drew samples of his own DNA and combined them with the DNA of his great-great-grandmother, Veronica. The goal of the procedure was to produce a genetically superior offspring, but it ended up making 2. Alexander named the gifted child Alexia and the unplanned byproduct Alfred. On September 2, 1977, 15-year-old William Birkin and 17-year-old Albert Wesker began entry-level management positions at the Arklay training facility. During the next 2 years, they worked alongside James Marcus as he got closer to a progenitor breakthrough. Marcus became obsessed with leeches and mixed their makeup with his decade of viral findings. The result was a new strain called Tyrant, or T for short. The new virus, unlike progenitor, bonded with its host without killing it. As a side effect, the subject gained the insatiable urge to feed. This new discovery elevated Marcus's standing in the company, and Spencer began to see him as a competitor. Oswell permanently shut down the training facility, and despite the lack of funding, Marcus decided to stay there and further his work. Birkin and Wesker left and continued their testing at a newer facility underneath the Spencer mansion. This revised location became home to several new prototypes, including the earliest form of T-virus zombie and the MA-121 Hunter Alpha. Birkin was delighted with these recent achievements, but was overcome with jealousy upon the news that Alexia Ashford had been appointed senior researcher at another Umbrella facility on Rockford Island. She was only 10 years old. Two years later, upon opening a secret door in the Antarctic research facility, Alexia and Alfred learned they were just an experiment hatched by Alexander. Eager to return the favor, Alexia injected her father with large quantities of her own version of the Tyrant virus called T. Veronica. The new mutagen was formed when she combined T with the genes of a queen ant and a rare strain called the Ancient virus. T. Veronica did not take to Alexander favorably, and the two children locked their contaminated father in the facility's basement. Believing T. Veronica was capable of so much more, Alexia decided she was better off taking matters into her own hands. Leaving her brother Alfred to watch over the House of Ashford, Alexia received a carefully measured dose of T. Veronica and placed herself in cryogenic suspension. She believed that after absorbing the virus over a long period of time, she could retain her mental faculties while still taking advantage of a tyrant's adaptive powers. She sealed herself in a test tube, not to be opened for 15 years. Umbrella had made big strides in T-virus development, and Spencer no longer felt it necessary to keep Dr. Marcus around. In the middle of his research, Marcus was gunned down as Birkin and Wesker looked on. Wesker uttered what he assumed would be the last words Marcus would ever hear. Taking over his work, Birkin and Wesker began plans for the ultimate weapon, the Tyrant. Birkin received the NE-alpha from Europe, an advanced mixture of the T-virus, and injected it into Lisa Trevor. Although the alpha vanished almost immediately, the procedure led to Birkin's greatest discovery. Somewhere deep within Lisa's tortured body, he found the G-virus. Eight years later, Albert Wesker had met most of his goals regarding the Tyrant project, and placed one last contingency plan into effect. Responding to a rash of cult-related crimes, most of which Umbrella was likely responsible for, Wesker convinced the Raccoon City Police Department to create the Special Tactics and Rescue Service. Wesker was placed in charge of Alpha Team, with Bravo Team led by Enrico Marini. 1 year later, Barry Burton joined, bringing along friend Chris Redfield.
Forget about it. Doesn't matter anymore. That was then, this is now.
Around that time, 2nd Lieutenant Billy Cohen was surviving the wilds of Africa with 4 other Marines after their squad numbers had been almost cut in half. They descended upon a village of innocents, and Billy's men were ordered to murder all 23 of them. He refused, and in a hailstorm of misinformation was sentenced to death by his base commander upon returning home. In a stroke of good or bad luck, his convoy was attacked by leeches on the way back to base. On the run, he fled into the night and vanished amidst the dark trees of the Arklay Mountains.
You must be careful, Rebecca. The forest is full of zombies.
The first one to find Billy was STARS member Rebecca Chambers. Resisting her duty to bring the alleged murderer to justice, she joined forces with Cohen to survive the unexpected surge of zombies flooding their safe haven, the Ecliptic Express. The train rerouted them to the lair of James Marcus, whose ghostly figure was being reproduced by the flock of leeches forming with malice and intent. The duo cleaned up the mess Spencer, Wesker, and Birkin left behind, and destroyed the facility. Rebecca then entered the Spencer mansion to discover the property was also factored into Marcus's revenge plot. She reunited with Bravo partner Richard Aiken and headed for the mansion's attic. Meanwhile, Alpha Team reached the mansion after having an encounter of their own. Chris, Jill, and Wesker were trapped inside, and Chris soon found himself alone. He discovered Rebecca nursing fresh wounds Richard had received from a giant snake. Richard recovered, but not for long. With each other's help, Chris and Rebecca unmasked Wesker as Umbrella's agent, rescued Jill, destroyed Tyrant, and turned George Trevor's final work of art into a memory. With Umbrella's secrets in danger of shambling into the open, Spencer decided again to make decisive cuts. Like Marcus before him, William Birkin was murdered by the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service. Seizing his revenge much faster than Marcus, however, Birkin was immediately revived as a G-Virus monster. He eliminated the entire UBCS attack force, minus one member, who delivered the G-sample safely to Umbrella. In Birkin's wake, he destroyed multiple vials of the T-Virus, which were ingested by a legion of rats, and bled into Raccoon City's water supply. It only took 2 days for this outbreak to reach the city. 8 survivors, including Kevin Ryman, were caught off guard when an undead mob crashed their quiet evening at Jay's bar. It took them 3 days to reach the police department, where they vacated the building with the last of the RPD. Marvin Branagh stayed behind and was soon after bitten. The following morning, Jill Valentine made the decision to leave the city for good. Her escape led her to Umbrella Platoon Delta and the NE Alpha-infused Tyrant 103 called Nemesis. Nemesis managed to tag Jill with an infected tentacle, and in the hands of soldier Carlos Oliveira, she lost consciousness.
Get away!
While Jill slept, Claire Redfield and Leon Kennedy arrived in Raccoon City and partnered up in self-defense. Once separated, Claire introduced herself to Sherry Birkin, daughter of William and his wife Annette. Leon dodged advances from Agent Ada Wong, who had been sent to retrieve the G-Virus by her boss, Albert Wesker. The form of tyrant that created the Nemesis, the T-103, struck Ada down and triggered the self-destruct sequence within Birkin's lab. Birkin, who had continued to mutate far beyond his former likeness, oozed into Leon, Claire, and Sherry's train right when its countdown clock struck 0.
Now listen to me. Don't give up. We're both gonna survive this. Just get over here!
The October sun rose in Raccoon City as Carlos revived Jill with supplies from a nearby hospital. Desperately evading Nemesis, Jill was forced to swat down the traitorous Umbrella officer, Mikhail Victor, as he fled in the last chopper for miles. If it wasn't for her old friend, Barry Burton, Jill would be lying in a pile of rubble. Barry flew Carlos and Jill just far enough to survive the nuclear blast. Raccoon City was no more. Only 2 months went by, and Claire Redfield found herself in the clutches of Umbrella once again. Once her brother Chris heard about the G-Virus, he left to find answers at a facility in Europe. While stuck on Rockford Island, Claire met Steve Burnside, forced both egos of Alfred Ashford's personality to face each other, and sent a distress email to Chris. Her escape was postponed as she was forced to crash land a military jet into the facility housing the sleeping Alexia. The little genius, all grown up, was revived from her slumber and faced the reunited Redfield team. Alexia also startled a disbelieving Albert Wesker, who after dismissing Alexia dead, was entranced by her new powers. She proved to be quite a match for Wesker, who waited patiently for his moment alone with Chris. Claire fueled a nearby jet as her brother fought a losing battle with the overpowered Wesker. The crumbling facility cut the fight short, and as Wesker vowed there would be a rematch, Claire and Chris blasted above the clouds. Five years passed. Chris and Jill turned in their STARS badges to form an anti-Umbrella task force. The main target was one of Umbrella's last corporate branches located in Russia. Controlled by ex-Colonel Sergei Vladimir, Spencer's right hand and the genetic model for the T-103, the fortress housed the Talos Project that greeted Chris and Jill as they reached the mainframe. Albert Wesker launched his own assault on the Russian base, confronting Sergei and his 2 bodyguards, custom-ordered tyrants, both named Ivan. Chris and Jill's operation managed to bankrupt Umbrella, tearing the company's finances to pieces. Wesker, as usual, got away scot-free. Leon Kennedy's career made it all the way to Washington when a familiar face, Jack Krauser, kidnapped the president's daughter, Ashley Graham. She was taken to Spain, turned over to Osmond Sadler, and injected with the egg form of Las Plagas. Jack was actually working for the omnipresent Albert Wesker, who added Ada Wong in case Leon obtained the Plagas sample before Krauser. He did, and Ada stole it, leaving Leon 3 minutes to finish his rescue. After bringing President Graham's daughter to safety, Leon's credentials were a perfect fit for a search and rescue mission at Harvardville Airport a year later. Claire Redfield had managed to get caught in the middle of another instant epidemic, and the reunited survivors were forced to eliminate the G-Virus-infected terrorist, Curtis Miller. In the incident's wake, Claire discovered that ex-Umbrella employee Frederick Downing, who was now working for one of their rivals, Will Pharma, planned the airport attack. Leon and Claire brought him to justice, but the never-ending power struggle saw pharmaceutical enterprise Tricell move to acquire all of Will Pharma's assets. International tensions and a growing distrust in the medical community warranted the creation of a team that specialized in these types of events. To take charge, the Global Pharmaceutical Consortium started the BSAA, or Bioterrorism Security Assessment Alliance. 2 of its earliest recruits were Chris Redfield and Jill Valentine. On one of their first missions, Jill vanished and was presumed dead. Chris was reassigned to a war zone in Kajuju, Africa, and given a new sidekick named Sheva Alomar. Clinging to hope that his old partner was still alive and dreading the prospect of Wesker being involved, Chris began a new mission. It goes without saying that Resident Evil has evolved into a grand conspiracy. It started in the seemingly peaceful woods outside of a nondescript town somewhere in the American Midwest, and now stands at the forefront of a worldwide terrorist threat, hinging on an operation that could cross the site where it all started 4 decades ago. In the beginning, these viral Frankensteins were shrouded in secrecy. Now, it's not a question of whom to blame, but how to stop them. Fans have become frustrated that zombies are no longer leading the charge, but the franchise has always placed makeshift monsters as the central theme, ever since Wesker introduced his ultimate bioweapon. Mikami's Biohazard, like any other giant in the industry, has vastly exceeded expectations. It coined a new genre, left fans ravished for each new installment, and when it seemed like the developers had loaded their last clip, made daring advancements that elevated the franchise to gaming greatness. That dog in the window, that village in the woods, that liquor on the ceiling, and that boss that just wouldn't quit are memories fans couldn't forget if they tried. The progenitor virus has evolved almost as dramatically as the series that spawned it, and we have a sinking suspicion that this evil will never die.